All right. Anyway, Revelation chapter 12. This chapter is all about kind of a scene, and it can be confusing, but it's really not. We just have to kind of jump into it and examine and look at it. And there's something that I used for the verses 1 and 2, the heading, if you will, on your paper for questions 1 and 2, that really makes this whole rest of this chapter kind of fit in. And I'll go ahead and throw it up so that this does kind of make more sense. But this chapter is symbolism. Okay, this whole chapter. Now, does that mean it does not describe factual events? No, it does. But the way that it describes them is symbolism, or the use of symbols and metaphors and kind of exaggerations. Is that what it was? Okay. So let's go ahead and jump in. Verses 1 and 2. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven. Okay, that right there tells us that this is a sign or a symbol. Okay, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pained to be delivered. Okay, contrary to what some people will tell you, this is not a symbolism of Mary. Okay, it is not. We'll see where, yes, the child that she is giving birth to is Christ. And we'll talk about that in a few verses. But this is symbolic of the children of Israel, the country and the Jewish nation. Okay, not even just the country of Israel like we see it today, but the Jewish nation as a whole. Okay, hence the supernatural clothing and position of the woman. Okay, she is not an earthly woman. This is not a physical woman. This is symbolic of the entire children of Israel who, through the line, give birth to Christ. Okay? We're going to see this woman throughout this chapter. Okay? And when we see it, it is referring to the woman being Israel. Okay? She's getting ready to have a baby. The crown represents the 12 tribes of Israel. So that's what we have there. Okay, verses 3 and 4. Again, this chapter is kind of easy and pretty quick moving. Okay, verses 3 and 4. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Again, this is a sign, a symbol of something. And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Okay. Satan shows up. Okay, that's kind of what's being symbolized here or explained here. This is verses 3 and 4 are explaining or symbolizing the fall of Satan. Okay, he's in heaven. He's part of God's followers or the created beings there that we call angels, and he falls with pride. Okay, y'all know the story. Why is it 7 heads and 10 horns and crowns and well, this is going back to some of the Old Testament symbolism of being Satan and who he is and what he controls. Not going to take a lot of time into that because we will get more into it in another chapter. But just know that it represents Satan, the dragon, and with the heads and the horns and all of these things, we'll explain again in detail in another chapter. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it now. But what he did try to do is he tried to destroy the child as soon as the baby was born. Okay, what does happen and what it doesn't explain here is that Satan tried to destroy the mom or the woman before she was ever around. Okay, that being all the Old Testament stories that we read of, where God's people went to war and people warred against them and people tried to invade them and take over, and some of the other things that happen and the corruption and all of these things is Satan trying to stop the Christ from being born. Okay? And then once the woman or Israel, once Christ is ready to come, Satan does anything and everything he can to stop Christ as soon as he is born. Okay? Anybody know what this is kind of talking about? This is kind of this is an actual event that we read about in God's Word. I'm sorry?
Male children under 2 years old were killed.
Exactly. When Herod tried to kill the male child under 2 years old, when the wise men came to him. Okay, that's why this says here that they tried to kill Christ. Or he's saying they tried to destroy the child as soon as it was born, or Christ as soon as he was born. That's how he did it. That's what this is referring to. Okay, Herod trying to kill the babies, trying to get at the Christ. Okay, Herod, that wasn't an idea he thought of on his own. Okay, he wasn't that smart. Okay, so that's something that Satan put into his head, and it was Satan trying to destroy the Christ before he had an opportunity to do his work. Okay? Did it work? Obviously not. Let's go on to verse 5. And she brought forth a man-child, also called a son, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Now, what this is referring to here is Christ completed his work. Notice here what it does not say. It does not say that Satan or the dragon stopped the death of the child. You know why? Because Christ died. But what the point was is he didn't stay dead. He rose again, therefore defeating the dragon or defeating Satan. And while Satan may have thought he won, but it didn't work. Yes, Christ died, but he didn't stay that way. See, this is kind of telling us here that maybe Satan wasn't all that smart. Maybe Satan wasn't all in the loop like he thought he was. And maybe he thought, like a lot of the Israelites did, that when the Christ came, that he was going to immediately set up his earthly kingdom. Maybe that was the case. Maybe that's what Satan thought. Maybe Satan didn't understand God's plan either. I don't know. Maybe he did. Who knows? That's just an idea. Just throwing that out there. Okay? But what's important to understand is that Christ completed his work. He's finished what he started out to do. Okay? It's not about the death of Christ. It's about the resurrection. Okay? That was when the work was completed. Not with the death of Christ. Okay? Verse 6. And the woman fled into the wilderness where she hath a place prepared of God, and they should feed her there 1,260 days. That number sound familiar? We talked about it several times last week, and we'll talk about it again this week. So what we have here, and I'm going to be honest, when I first sat down to study this, I had to quit and come back to it the next day because this just kind of threw me off. I was like, we're talking about before Christ, before Christ was born, and we talk about Christ, and now all of a sudden this time frame comes up of being back to the rapture or the tribulation rather. I thought, how does that all go together? It just does. Okay, it just does. We're looking at pretty much the whole span of history here. Okay? From the time of the founding of the children of Israel, they were preparing for the Christ to come. Okay? They were constantly crying out for a Savior to come and save them. And they got a type after shadow after shadow after type of the Christ that was to come. And then finally the Christ came. But they had to suffer a lot until the Christ came. That's what it's saying here back in verse 2 where it talks about the woman. She is travailing or in pain of labor. They had to suffer until the Christ comes. Okay, then, once the Christ completes His work, we have there in 4 and 5. Then, look what happens in verse 6. What did we just read? The woman has to flee again. Why? Because she knows she is going to have to suffer some more. Look at it from the time that Christ ascended back into heaven. His followers have been nothing but persecuted, whether it's still talking about the Jews or whether we're talking about the Christians. Both groups of people have been severely persecuted and are, in some cases, literally hiding for their lives from this persecution. So here we have in verse 6, God is going to protect His people. Now specifically here, this is referring to, we're back into the tribulation period. And again, the 1,260 days is talking, in this case, literally talking about the last half of the tribulation period. Where the children of Israel, what we're not sure is if this is actually talking about a literal place where the children of Israel are going to go hide, or whether they're just going to be spiritually protected from Satan and his persecution in those days. Okay? Now, the rest of this chapter is broken up into two different parts. Verses 7 through 12 explains, 7 through 9 rather, maybe it's more than two parts. 7 through 9 kind of expands upon the fall of Satan. 10 through 12 also again kind of expands on the fall of Satan, but it's really kind of a speech from the voice of heaven. And then the last 13 through 17 explains a little bit more about verses 5 and 6, or rather, really 6, rather. Okay, so let's go into 7 through 9. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Okay, this is describing the fall of Satan here. Okay? Some people will tell you that this is actually during the tribulation period where Satan kind of gets his angels together and tries to fight against Christ again. I'm really not with that. I think Satan did that once and he knows he ain't going to win it again. So his goal is to not beat God at that war. Okay, I think he's smart enough to know he ain't going to win that war again. At least not like that. So what is he going to do? He's going to do more of what verse 9 is talking about, where he goes around and tries to deceive the world and deceive the people and God's people, trying to get them to either stay away from God or leave God and leave God's side. But notice he is limited by God's power. Okay, he can only do what God allows him to do. The word Satan literally means accuser. Okay? And this is where we hear, I believe it's in the Old Testament, or maybe it was Christ, that talks about Satan being roaming the earth like a lion, seeking who he can accuse and devour and destroy. Okay, this is really what this is talking about here. Satan is trying to war against God, and he lost the battle. The physical, well, we would call it close to physical as we can understand it, heaven being, but a literal battle in heaven, he lost. Okay, so what's he going to do? He's going to try to beat God at another game. Okay, so he's going to try to lead and destroy as many people and as much of God's creation as he can. Okay, that's his goal. Verses 10 through 12, let's jump there. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, "Now is come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time." Okay, this is a proclamation of the loud voice in heaven. Oh, I missed 7 through 9. 7 through 9 is the fall of Satan. Seven through 9 is the fall of Satan. Okay. All right, 10 through 12 is the proclamation of the loud voice in heaven. I'm not sure why that's being slow, but anyway, let's move on. The proclamation of the loud voice in heaven. This proclaims victory in heaven, ultimate victory, total victory. Okay, this is also explains what Satan did in heaven. Look at what he did in verse 10. He accused the brethren. That's you and me. Okay? He is before God, and he's saying, "Hey, look what this person did, or look what that person did." And Christ is saying, "Yeah, no, they're okay. You know, as long as they ask for forgiveness, they're okay." But Satan's job is to accuse the brethren. That's us before God constantly. That's what he does. Okay? But, verse 11, how is Satan defeated? By the blood of the Lamb. Notice how that is first. The blood of the Lamb is what overcomes Satan. How do we beat him? We don't. Christ did. Okay? People will tell you, well, you gotta, if you want to beat Satan, you gotta do this. No, ain't gonna work. How do we defeat Satan? We don't. We can stand up to him. How can we even stand up to him? Not because of me, but because of the blood of the Lamb. Because the blood of Christ, and having it applied to my life, and having my sins forgiven, that is how I can stand. And then notice what the next thing is. By the word of their testimony. How we stand and how we live life through that blood of Christ. That is our testimony. How we live life through the blood of Christ is our testimony. That is how we overcome, is by living the life that Jesus has led us to live and set before us, and an example that He has set before us. That's how we do that. And lastly, what does He say there? And loved not their lives unto death. What does that mean? That means we're not afraid to die for Christ. That's what that means. That's how we overcome. So because Satan is defeated in heaven, verse 12 talks about heaven can rejoice because Satan no longer has a part there. But because he is pretty much having free reign here on earth, the Bible says, whoa, get ready because it's going to get ugly. Okay? Satan knows that he has but a limited amount of time to destroy. So he's going to make the best use as he can of that time. Okay? Again, kind of 13 through 17 again goes very quickly. So, verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. Remember, who is the woman talking about? Israel. So he's not talking about Mary. He's talking about the whole country of Israel. Satan is trying to persecute and destroy the children of Israel. If we bring this back to the context of the tribulation period, even those Jews or Israelites that aren't Christians or haven't been saved at this point, the dragon or Satan, he doesn't really care. They're Jews, he's going to try to wipe them out. So the entire country of Israel is going to be severely persecuted. Okay? Verse 14. And to the woman were given... Satan will try to destroy Israel. Verse 14. And the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and a times and half a time from the face of the serpent. Okay, again, we're back to that 3.5 year thing. God's going to protect His people. This is, last time we were talking about God's protection, it was probably kind of a generic protection. Wherever God's people were at, they were being protected. But this time in particular, it's probably somewhere very specific that God is going to lead His followers someplace physical where they can literally be protected from Satan and from the beast and the Antichrist and the false prophet and all of those things that they have at their disposal. These people are going to literally be protected for 3.5 years. Okay? Why does it say 2 wings? Why is it so specific that it says 2 wings of a great eagle? Possibly because the people are going to move there in 2 different stages, or because it's 2 separate places. Okay? Just when we see something as specific as the 2 wings of, because if he just says the wings of an eagle, well, eagles have 2 wings. Okay? That's kind of, we know that. So why does he specifically mention 2 wings of an eagle? Because it's got to be, there's something significant about that number there. Okay? So it's probably, again, either 2 separate places or 1 place that 2 groups of people are going to, or possibly even referring to the Jewish Christians and the non-Jewish Christians. So it would be 2 separate groups of people going to inhabit this place where they're going to be protected. Okay? Verses 15 and 16. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Again, okay, we're talking about symbolism here. Okay, this chapter is a lot of symbolism, if not all symbolism. So, does this literally mean that Satan tries to come up with a literal flood of water to try to drown these people out? Probably not. Okay, this is going to be some other type of flood. Whether they try, maybe it's like a flood of fire where they try to burn them out, or maybe just a flood of missiles or weapons of some kind. We don't know, but somehow or another, Satan is going to try to destroy these people that are in this place. And literally, the earth is going to open up and take in whatever Satan's trying to use to destroy those people. Okay? Should be something interesting to see if we're around to see it, but hopefully not. Okay, but nevertheless, that is what it is. So, verse 17, kind of an interesting verse. And the dragon was wroth, or very mad, with the woman. It went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which kept the commandments of God and hath the testimony of Jesus Christ. Okay, Satan tried to destroy everybody else. Okay, Satan tries to destroy everybody else. Now, let's look at something here. Who is he trying to destroy if all of the Christians are in a physical place being protected? Well, the simple answer is not all of the Christians are in that place. There are going to be Christians to the rest of the world, or maybe Jews to the rest of the world that are Christians, that are going to be outside of that physical place of God's protection that Satan is going to try to get to and destroy. Okay, he can't get to the group, so he's going to go after the individuals. Okay, does that sound familiar? Does that sound like one of Satan's tactics to you? It should. Satan knows that he is going to have very little success if he tries to attack a church as a whole. But he's going to have much more success if he tries to isolate an individual and keep them isolated. This is why another reason we see Satan described to as an lion, or some type of big hunter cat, like a cheetah or a leopard or something. Because they don't go, when they're hunting, my non-countrified words here, when they're hunting, they don't charge into the middle and go for the biggest one. What do? They try to get one and separate one, usually one of the smaller ones, one of the weaker ones, and devour that thing as quickly as they can. Okay, they don't go after the whole group because, even a family of lions, 5 or 6 lions, doesn't stand a whole lot of chance against, 200 buffalo or 200 wildebeest. They have to get them isolated, and usually the ones they go after are the weaker ones. That's why it's so important for us to stay together as Christians and work together and be minded, and those of us that are stronger to help the weaker Christians, so that weaker Christians do not get isolated and picked off by Satan. Okay? Any questions or comments about anything we talked about tonight?